Hello everyone, this is StrawberryShorty here with The Santa Clauses Chapter 5, Across the Yuleverse. Another kind of weird title. I actually completely forgot to make the video for the last episode. Like, I have it recorded, thankfully, but I didn't put the video together. I like to try and do that as quickly as possible because, we get copyright claimed on every episode. So far, all those have expired, but it's still frustrating. Anyway, let's jump right into this. So last time we cut off with Scott's family freezing and a gloved hand grabbing his shoulder, while at the North Pole elves are disappearing. And it wasn't really a surprise, because we all knew he would be returning, and I also saw a spoiler in a news article. They just kind of threw it out there. But the gloved hand belongs to Bernard, who's back. And it looks very different than how we remember him, but in fairness, it has been like 20 plus years. So, I kind of think they should have hid his return. Like, it's the same thing I was thinking about, like, Mr. X in Resident Evil. The Resident Evil 2 remake. Like, because they cut the B scenarios, which he was originally exclusive to, people thought he might not even come back. And I think confirming he would and showing the pictures was a bad idea. Because imagine how much more freaked out players would have been if he just shows up out of nowhere and no one's expecting him. But that's kind of a weird thing to talk about with this. Anyway. So yeah, I think they should have hit his return, because imagine how much more surprised people would have been. Although they probably would have been a lot more shocked by how different he looks. He's right though, we did miss him. It's my favorite character from the original movie. But it's like, where have you been? We hear from Scott that he went somewhere and then they never heard from him again. I don't know what the heck Scott was saying in this scene, because I keep thinking it's like some sort of concert thing, because I can't hear what the heck he's supposed to be saying. But apparently, Bernard fell in love with a human, and I guess they eloped. The weird thing with this for me is that no one knew this. Like, Bernard falling in love with a human, giving up the elf life and all that, because he apparently had to give up magic. It just seems kind of strange, because you couldn't, give notice. You couldn't tell Scott and the others, like, hey, I'm leaving, or train a replacement or something. I kind of actually wonder what happened to Curtis. Curtis has just vanished as well. But, yeah, so Bernard also had to give up his magic, which is kind of weird, because, like you'd almost think that they'd bring the wife to the North Pole and, like, make her an elf. But, yeah. So Bernard unfreezes the family, and apparently Carol knows him. And I was very confused, like, how does Carol know him? And then I was like, oh yeah, Bernard was in the second movie. Because he doesn't act like Bernard at all in that movie, so I keep kind of forgetting that he does that. And then he freezes the family again, and it's like, why did you do that? And he leads Scott through a door into a black and white world. And I'm thinking that they're going to go like It's a Wonderful Life with this. I've never seen It's a Wonderful Life, but I have a vague idea what it's about. So I thought they were going to do something like that, showing Scott Christmas without him or something. And Scott is getting on Bernard's nerves, which it's nice, because I like aggravated Bernard. More aggravated elves. I also notice in this scene that Bernard still has pointy ears, even though he apparently gave up magic. What's up with that? But we meet another Santa Claus, and this is apparently Santa of the past from the Great Depression. And Bernard apparently still has some powers. I don't know how this works, even though he says he gave up magic. But, we get the whole spiel about, Christmas is nice and giving people nice things, and, trying to help them just survive and all that. And Scott doesn't want any part of this, He's not... he feels like he made the right choice. And he keeps trying to leave, but he can't do much. And Fallen Santa and Bernard follow him. I call him Fallen Santa because this is when the Santa reveals that he's that Santa that fell off the roof. It's not entirely clear what's happening, because we go to the past, and they keep calling it the Yuleverse. I don't know if this is like some sort of metaverse or whatever. It's a little confusing, but yeah. We flash back to the past, and we see young Scott Kelvin, and Fallen Santa, he has a nice spry landing when he falls down the fireplace. It's actually really impressive. And he meets young Scott, who's who had a really long Christmas list, but it was only because he was asking for presents for his family because they needed him, which Santa praises. And he talks about, you know, believing in Christmas and, like, what happens when people don't believe, and it's like, yeah, some of them end up on the Polar Express. But, like, apparently just some of them. Like, I don't know why everyone doesn't end up on the Polar Express. What makes certain kids more important than other kids? Why didn't the boy's sister end up on the Polar Express? Like, I have questions. And apparently Scott doesn't remember this because he got dusted, which I find this kind of strange, because why would this dust not have been used following this? Like, when Scott was being arrested in the first film, why didn't he use it then? And, like, I feel like there's a lot of times where he's run into people and could have used that dust and didn't. So, yeah. And he's still kind of surprised when he learns that the fall was intentional, because past Santa is like, you know, I've been on about 1 billion some roofs. You think that you shouting startled me? And Scott has this weird look on his face. I'm not entirely sure it was from that. I think it might have been like a weird Christmas gathering thing that was going on. This episode was all over the place. A lot of crazy stuff happened, and a lot of other Santas. Krampus appears. It's very odd. But anyway, and I dislike the idea that Santa basically sort of faked his death. I'm still not 100% clear if he actually died or not, or what's going on. But I dislike the idea that he did it on purpose, because it's like, you could have scarred Scott for life, could have scarred the kid for life. You know, he thinks he murdered someone, essentially, and murdered Santa Claus, what's more. And, like, what if someone else had seen it? And apparently, Scott is actually the first human Santa, which is why none of the other Santas have had families. Although I'm not sure that entirely flies, because can non-humans not have children? Because Santa kind of became magical when he became Santa, so I don't know. But the point is, they were hoping that Scott could change things. It's again, it's a little unclear, but it seems like there's been a bunch of different Santas throughout the ages, but they've all been magical, and it's just kind of been, like, crazy. Like there was Krampus, who steals toys from children for a period. And it's like, we didn't want to, you know, have all this random Santa stuff happening, so we wanted to make it so that you would become magical as a human, you'd marry, and then you'd have kids, and the kids would hopefully have magic. And apparently they wanted to turn, like, the Santa into a lineage monarchy kind of thing, with, like, passing it on to child. And it's like, this is really becoming a lot more like Game of Thrones. Like, I made a comment early on, but it's really becoming like that, where they're trying to, like, build this kingdom or whatever, and it's like, this is a bad idea. Because, like, what if you have a child who's a bad kid, or abuses the power, you know? I'm telling you, there's a fanfic waiting to be written here. But, yeah, so that's their whole plot thing. And I still have a lot of questions, because apparently that's what the clauses were for. Like, the Mrs. Claus was to make sure he got married, so he would have to have a family. And apparently Carol was the first Mrs. Claus. I don't know if I entirely believe that. But we cut to the North Pole, where Betty and, I believe, that really odd little child-looking elf are trying to build trucks, and Betty has no building skills at all. Simon swings by. He's still a jerk, criticizing them for building such a basic toy, and like, oh, the person who wanted it wrote a letter. Like, whoa, that's lame. And he leaves, and I'm just like, where the frick is Grace? We still haven't seen Grace. And apparently the little girl elf is named Pontoon, and the snake elf with the eye patch walks by, and Pontoon vanishes. And there's like no elves. All the elves have pretty much vanished. Like, it's just a lot of empty spaces. It's kind of disturbing. But so we go back to Scott. Scott is now in a room with all the different Santas and Bernard. And I'm not sure why Krampus is here. He seems more like he should be a villain. He's got kind of a cool design, but seriously, I need to know how Krampus existed. Bernard apparently knew all of these Santas, which, wow. That's something. And I'm still just wondering what happened to all these people after they stopped being Santa, and are they in some other world, like a heaven type world, or what? Some special universe. Again, they keep saying Yuleverse. I'm not sure, but Bernard gives this big speech about how some of these Santas drove him absolutely nuts and had terrible ideas, and Scott was one of them. He was against the whole hire a human thing, but he ended up liking Scott a lot and thinks he's the best Santa ever, and it's just like, but yet you left without a word, you couldn't even tell me. And it shows us a picture of his wife, who is apparently Vanessa Redgrave. I don't entirely know who that is. I believe she is an actress, but I guess good going, Bernard. And still more emptiness. We go to the control room. There's like one elf left, and it's trying to explain to Simon, like, there's no magic. I can't make more magic. The only reason the magic is still lasting at all is because there's like some focus point of it here at the North Pole. And I'm just like, it's going to be Grace, right? And it's Grace. And yeah, so is this the part where I don't think this is the part where Betty meets Grace. I remember she's making Christmas decorations, and Simon comes to see her. And like, she talks about how much she loves it there, and it's like, do you? Because it seems kind of weird. Because, like, he's not spending any time with her, so you'd think she'd feel a bit more neglected, but she's oddly happy. But it seems weird to me, like, that's not really being addressed. Like, she wants to help out, and they just have this brief scene, and then he pretty much leaves. Also, I kind of found myself wondering why there was no kids' clause, you know? Like, for Scott and all that. But anyway, Scott... We flash back to Scott, who returns to his family, and they are just unfrozen. And Scott's like, well, I need to go to the North Pole. And I'm just like, where the frick is Noel? Where's Noel been throughout this? And then Noel walks through the door the minute I think that. And the family has run off by this point because they're going to pack for the North Pole because they want to go help the elves and they're worried about them. I thought it would be like a bigger deal, like having to leave their friends and new lives behind and whatnot. But they run off to do that. Scott insists Noel warp them to the North Pole and leaves the family behind. And it's like, why did you leave the family behind? Like, wouldn't they be of use? It just seems like a bad idea. But, let's see. We flash back to the North Pole. Oh, well, no, we're not in the North Pole yet. Or maybe we are. Yeah, I think Scott and Noel arrive at the North Pole. We're still focused on them. And Noel finally admits that he, I think we should see Betty before Simon, you know. She's kind of like the most important person in my life, and I need to talk to her. And Scott says, oh, I thought it was me for the longest time. And it's like, yeah, I kind of thought the same thing. And I'm just thinking the kids are probably going to use magic to get to the North Pole in some way, because we flash back to them. Riley shows up. She likes something that Sandra is wearing and is able to have it ordered and delivered within seconds, which is nice. I wish more companies would do that. I just don't approve of ruining Christmas to do it. But, yeah. So, she doesn't believe the whole Santa thing. They're planning to find some way to get to the North Pole. There's like a big vortex in the sky that only the kid can see, only Buddy. And Sandra has an idea. She has an idea for how to get there, and I'm just like, is it going to be a flying horse? Because it just seems like it would be with her. Back to the North Pole, Betty hears Grace playing the harp and compliments her. And it kind of just dawns on me in this scene that, like, Betty must still have some level of hope, despite how she can act at times. Otherwise, she wouldn't have lasted this long. And, like, Grace is, like, wondering if everything is okay, and, like, about the elves are vanishing. Like, apparently she's only just noticed that the elves are disappearing, and Betty's surprisingly honest with her that, you know, they need, like, belief in Christmas and all that. And apparently, for some reason, Grace misses Edie, the crazy elf. I don't know why. But she's like, well, my dad will help us, and Betty plays along with that one at least. Then walks out, and then right after that, she ends up vanishing too, right as Newell appears looking for her, so he misses this happening. Which, you know, that's a bummer. Back to the family, Riley is upset over Buddy suddenly leaving and like, oh, I don't know when I'll be back or whatever. And like we have not seen enough of these two together for me to care that much. And she wants the truth, so he tells her the truth, which we all know isn't going to work really well. But he's like, just stay up late on like Christmas Eve, and if Santa comes down, you'll see it's my dad. And it's like, why would Santa come? I don't believe it's Santa. He's like, he's going to get your brother that Funko he wanted. And he says some kind of specific Funko, but I can't hear what he says. And they leave. And at this point, I'm kind of wondering if Buddy's going to end up being Santa, because he's the only one that can see the vortex. Scott runs into the snake elf, and I'm just thinking that the weird gray hat he has on looks like a Hershey's Kiss. And then I realize it actually is supposed to be a Hershey's Kiss because it has the little ribbon with the writing on it. So they go off together. We flash right back to the family, and they're in a stable where, sure enough, there are horses. And Sandra is giving the horse a pep talk, telling it can fly if it believes it can fly. And at this point, I'm kind of starting to wonder if the ending is just going to be that we're going to have two Santas, Sandra and Buddy. Back to the North Pole. There's apparently some kind of weird security system in place. Santa touches some tinsel on a tree. I think it's called tinsel. The snake-like stuff you wrap around. And it like coils around him, and a drone shows up and holds them hostage. This all seems a bit extreme. I'm not sure why any of this is there. Like, who was this for? It's odd. So they're caught. The family manages to fly using a horse named Butter and the sleigh cart thing. I'm trying to figure out why this cart is up when they're flying. Like, the horse maybe can have magic. This is just a normal cart thing, though. So, yeah. We cut to Santa, Scott, and Snake in the jail that we saw a few episodes back. And Simon has found them. And apparently the orb could have teleported them out of the cell right away, but for some reason they didn't use it. And Simon takes it back. And Simon is convinced he's doing everything right. And leaves. And we end with the line of Santa asking Snake, what are you in for? And it's like, why are you asking that? You know what he's in for. Like, it doesn't really make any sense. Like, it would make more sense if you didn't know him and know what happened. But, so this is the next to last episode. Next one should be the finale. I'm not entirely sure where they're going to go or how they're going to wrap things up. We learned a lot of lore this episode. I don't know that I really understood it. I think some of it could have been explained a little better. At least they're addressing it, I guess, which is nice, more than I expected. So, what did you think of this episode? What do you like of the lore we got? What do you think's going to happen, or hope happens, in the finale? What did you think of seeing Bernard again? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!